There's a lot of different ways. On a sad note, but then also a positive note, the problem is so big and so vast. That's the sad part of it. If you've got a very localized problem, you have to only treat it in one very specific localized way. The sad part is the problem is so big. But in a way, that then lays a fertile ground for the fact that so much is needed from wherever you are. So depending on what your abilities is, Puja Swamiji always talks about the type of donations that we want, which is time, technology, tenacity, talent. So whatever you have, your skills, your abilities, your expertise, different people are going to have different abilities and different amounts of time, different resources. So whatever you have that you can offer. So we're working, for example, as we've been talking about bringing in proper sanitation, proper hygiene. We're also working with tree plantation. We're working with solid waste management. We're working with cleaning the rivers. We're working with alternative energy to the hydropower projects, because all of these things are so interlinked that they form different pieces of what has ended up becoming a very large problem. We're working with schools and education. So there's so many different ways to get involved, whether sitting back where you live, whether coming here and donating time, whether it's raising awareness, whether it's getting more and more technology together to help out what's going on, whether it's coming here and helping. But on the most basic level, almost every city in the world, I hesitate to say every city, but it probably is every city, but let's stick with almost every city, has an area of that city, no matter how prosperous the city may be, in which there are people without proper sanitation, without proper hygiene, without access to what they need to live healthy lives. If you have the time and the ability to be here, to serve here, or to serve these programs from where you are, great. But if not, don't worry. I'm sure there are populations of people, bodies of water, where you are, that are polluted, that need to be cleaned. Puja Swamiji was in Los Angeles recently and driving through a part of LA where there was a sign that said the LA River. And as he drove over it, he was looking at it and he's like, where's the river? And the people in the car said, well, yeah, there is no river. And he said, what? Is it just dry temporarily? And I said, well, I grew up in LA. I never saw a drop of water in the LA River. So he said, well, next time I come back, we'll come together, we'll do something for the LA River. So even though we're sitting here on the banks of Ganga, even though in many ways that's really the dire situation, we've got 450 million people dependent upon the water in Ganga for their lives. But that doesn't mean that if where you're based is LA and what you can do is get involved with bringing the LA River back to life, that's not part of the same program. It is. Wherever you are, if you can work for clean water, for bringing some awareness, concepts, assistance to populations there, that's the same work. Eventually all bodies of water become one. Eventually, all people are one. So we can talk later, I can introduce you to different members of our team, or we can talk about where you live, what you can do, what your skills are. But there's really something for everyone in this program and in the projects. The question is, can you be spiritual or live spirituality without believing in God? Can you find that place of divine purity and live it without believing in God? Yes and no. And what I mean by that is yes, you can find it without believing in God as God has been defined and boxed by what we would call the organized religions of the world. Can you be deeply, deeply spiritual, attain enlightenment, live in purity and divinity without subscribing to an organized religion? Absolutely. However, can you be deeply spiritual without believing that there's anything to life other than my bones and skin and blood and material existence? No, because spirituality is the spirit. So if I don't believe that there's anything more to this world than the fact that I took birth, I've got this body has desires, it likes some things, it doesn't like other things, and at the end this body's going to die, and so really all I need to do is keep the body happy, fulfill its desires for as many years as I have. That's not a conducive perception to a spiritual life. So you don't need to believe in God as a definition that our organized religions give us. But you need to be able to connect to the fact that this is not what it's about. That you and I are not actually separate. That I'm not separate from that grass or the tree or the air or my breath. That there's something that is much bigger, of which we actually are all a part, and we just don't experience that most of the time. And that's what spirituality is the connection to the spirit. And the spirit doesn't necessarily have to have a name, it doesn't have to have a form, it doesn't have to have an image, it doesn't have to have a set of prayers or rituals associated with it. But it exists, and it is everything, and it permeates everything, and it's what brings the light to everything. If you walk into your house, let's say, and you've got a lamp, and you've got a blender, and you've got your computer, and you've got a toaster, and you've got a cordless phone, and you've got all of these things that are completely separate items. And yet, every single one of them only works if it's plugged into a socket. Your blender's not going to blend until you plug it in. The toaster's not going to toast unless you plug it in. The lamp's not going to give you any light unless you plug it in. So even though from your perspective you'd say, well, these are all very separate things. This is a full lamp, a full toaster, a full blender. What we're not realizing is that in order for them to actually have that spark that makes a blender, rather than just a lump of plastic and glass, is the electricity. And in the same way, I mean, it's a simplified version, but in the same way, each of us looks different. We're all a different mix of plastic and glass and metal and, all the different pieces. But that same spark that brings light to each of us is the same. The electricity that fuels a blender is the exact same electricity running through the exact same wires that fuels your TV or that fuels the lamp, even though in the lamp it comes out looking one way, the TV comes out looking another way, the blender comes out looking another way. And that awareness on our level is what spirituality is. There is this spirit. That's the energy, that's the light that connects us. So we need an awareness and a connection to that. And that's what our spiritual practice is. But no, it doesn't have to have a name, it doesn't have to have a form, it doesn't have to be part of what a church or a temple or a lineage specifically said.